Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In my last two videos we looked at swatches up close from my granulating paints in my granulation palette, but I figured I also have some that are not in this palette, like this one, the Opera Pink by Daniel Smith. I just couldn't resist and really wanted to share these paints that are outside of that palette but are still granulating with you guys because they do deserve some love and attention. Like in the previous videos, I will swatch them out in quite a close-up view, so sometimes you might see the screen shake a little because the camera is attached to my desk, so if I move it just slightly, you're going to see that back in the footage. I did try to color correct for you guys, so I tried to get the paint to look as natural as it would look to you in real life on the screen. Not easy, and not every paint is 100% the same. If it really differs a lot, I will let you guys know. Now, we started off with this Opera Pink, and I can tell you that this is one that the camera had a lot of issues with because of its neon qualities. It's a very vivid, bright pink color, and it does actually have some granulation. You do, however, have to water it down quite a bit to see that granulation form. On screen, you can actually see the granulation in that diluted section right there. The pigment used to create this color is PR122, together with fluorescent, as Daniel Smith states on their flyer. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure the fluorescent bit is the one that really gives this vibrant punch to this paint, making it look neon in my opinion, and making it very hard for my camera to capture its likeness of on the screen for you guys. This paint is very easy to lift back off of the paper as you see displayed, so you can edit some of your mistakes quite easily. Now, a vivid bright pink, what immediately comes to mind is floral artists that would like to work with this paint. But of course, it's not just limited to that. You could also use it for a lot of other stuff, and this paint is quite a bit more vibrant than the other paints I've shown. Now, the Imperial Purple that I'm showing on screen right now is also a very, very vivid color. This paint is made up of two pigments, the PB29, a blue pigment, and the PV19, a violet pigment. Now, you can already imagine what this color might do for you on the paper. So while we see here that an even wash will result in quite a unified looking purple without too much of heavy granulating properties, if you start to dilute this paint and start creating water blooms in this paint, you will see this paint shine because those separate pigments will peek right through. To illustrate this point, I create some back blooms and dilute the paint somewhat at certain areas so you guys can greatly see the difference the bit of water added makes. And especially with this paint, I have found, as in other paints with many pigments together, it actually takes the drying time for the paint to really settle properly and show off what it can do for you. So if you just make an even wash of this paint and display it or use it in your art, it won't look as striking as it will when adding water or diluting it heavily and waiting for it to dry completely before deciding if you want to add other colors or go over it again. Because if you let it dry, the paint really will work its magic. So it takes some patience. Give it that because it is worth it. This paint also lends itself great for watercolor artists that are into painting florals or adding pops of color to their painting when working in landscapes. But of course, they can also be used for artists that like designing clothes and adding texture to those clothes if they create characters, let's say. And this paint can really bring some oomph to that clothes that they are designing just simply by being the paint it is and drying marvelously. So I really enjoyed using this paint, and I think you guys will too. Now, the color we are jumping into now is Moonglow, and I think a lot of you guys may have already heard of this color. I have featured it in other videos that I made, so maybe in my videos or any watercolor artist using granulating paints, because this is a very, very well-known Daniel Smith paint. Moonglow is kind of a buzzword paint, in my opinion. Everybody was talking about it online and in the art community, that this paint was so lovely, the quality was good, the granulation was pretty, and the different types of colors meant, like when you let it dry, are amazing. So of course I own this paint. It's because I bought a set that this paint was included in, and I can say now that the hype is well worth it, because it is great quality and it does create some really lovely textures and have a lot of different colors in them. Now, the different colors are easily explainable by the pigments, because it is made up of pigments PG18, a green, a PB29, a blue, and the PR177, so a red. So mixing blue and red together will give you the purple hue you see. Green will kind of neutralize it a bit. And if you dilute it, you can see all the colors pop out. All right, French Ultramarine. Now, this is a paint made up of one pigment in the Daniel Smith formula. It is PB29. And PB29 is one of those pigments that you see mentioned a lot in paints that are made up of multiple pigments and granulate. To name a few of these would be the Tundra Pink, the Tundra Violet, the Rose of Ultramarine, the Imperial Purple we have just seen on screen, and the Moonglow just before this French Ultramarine. So I'm telling you guys, a lot of those lovely qualities in those super granulating paints are because of this PB29 pigment that is in this paint as one singular pigment. So if you are thinking of mixing your own granulating paints and adding multiple pigments together to create lovely mixes of your own, then think about buying something like a French Ultramarine that only features the PB29 pigment in a paint formula. It will really help you out when wanting to create mixes with a lovely blue color in there. French Ultramarine is a heavily granulating vivid blue paint by Daniel Smith. And the granulation, as shown on screen right now in an even wash, is nothing remarkable. But this paint will heavily granulate if you dilute it more with water, which also can explain a lot of those mixes that this is featured in, really shining the moment you add more water to them instead of using it in an even wash. Knowing the pigments you are using in a mix or that are featured in a paint and how they respond on their own really can tell you a lot about how paint mixed with them in there is going to react and how you might use it to the best of its abilities and really show off what they can do. Now, all that's left for this paint swatch is to let it dry on screen for you guys. And I can say that, of course, the gloss is going to disappear because the water is going to evaporate. But the pigment in and of itself is so vibrant and will remain vibrant even when drying. So, again, for floral artists, this could be great. But also when creating characters or comic books, skies, a great paint overall. Next up, a paint that gets so many mixed reviews. It is Green Apatite Genuine by Daniel Smith. I have this paint because it was included in a set curated by Jean Haynes, a watercolor artist, together with Daniel Smith for their brand. It features a lot of paints that Jean really likes and uses a lot. So Green Apatite Genuine was in there. So I did no research prior to purchasing the set. It just looked like a nice, fun set featuring paints with varying qualities and a varying mix of colors in them. So I thought it would be a nice one to start out with, starting a nice watercolor collection. As the name will tell you, the genuine part in there means that this is a Primatech paint. So if you look up the pigment information, it just says genuine green apatite, which is a mineral that looks like this. Primatech paints tend to granulate because they mix up these minerals and put them in a paint, leaving bigger chunks of the substance, the mineral in this case, in that mix. So obviously those will head to the bottom faster than the other things used in the paint. I'm not going to go through it all again, but if you do want to know how that works exactly, the process of granulation and what you can expect, check out my Granulation 101 video if you haven't already, in which I explain it all to you step by step. Now back to this pigment, you can see that it dries up and it looks kind of muddy and dirty with a dark granulation, and green is not a color for everyone, so some people do not appreciate this paint. The Cascade Green is a paint that is less controversial and is not a Primatech paint. So this green is a deep green with a blue undertone in it, especially when used in a flat wash like you see on screen. It is made up of the pigments PBR7, so a brown pigment, and the PB15, which is a blue pigment. Now, I think the brown that they did use in this blends a little bit to the green side, and then mixed in with the blue actually makes for the blue greenish hue you see on screen. As with other granulating paints, if you dilute this paint, the granulation will come forward a lot more than when using it in mass tone. But the most stunning thing about this paint is when you start to play with it instead of leaving it as a flat wash. If you put some extra water in here, creating blooms, and wait until the paint dries, you can see it push back. That's nothing special, but wait till you guys see what happens when this paint dries. I mean, it wouldn't be an overstatement to say that this paint surprises and creates such a cool effect. With that blue peeking out, great color, great paint. Okay, Undersea Green, you guys, I have had such a struggle capturing this paint on screen, and still I didn't manage to get it 100% right for you guys. This paint, when I look at it, is a lot more green, bluish than you see on screen. In my opinion, on screen, it looks like a very muted brown gray, and it's quite similar on screen to something like, say, the forest gray from the Schmincke range that we've seen in the last video I did on swatches. I don't know how to change this without turning the entire background of the paper green along with it. So I have tried and tried, but I didn't manage it. At least not in the Premiere Pro when editing this video. So I decided to go out of my way and get my very good camera to take a good picture in neutral lighting of this paint, and I'll just add that in on the screen for you guys at the end of letting this paint dry, so stay tuned for that. But back to this paint. This paint is called Undersea Green by Daniel Smith, and it is made up of actually 3 pigments. It is the PB29, so that French ultramarine pigment we just saw, together with PO48, an orange pigment, and a PY150, which is a yellow pigment. So that would explain the more brownish, neutralized green tone that this paint actually has. So maybe the camera wasn't wrong, but my eyes just see it different. I don't know, but it is a strongly granulating paint that makes up for a really nice color in muted forest landscapes, or just a nice background color for like a portrait. Now that the color's dry on screen, this is what it looks like when the paint dries completely and I take a picture of it with a camera that is, I guess, more advanced or something, or better with colors. I don't know, but this is very close to the way I see it with my eyes. So that might give you some direction whether to buy this paint or not, because this is what it will look like on your white paper. Alright, on to Lunar Blue by Daniel Smith. This paint heavily granulates and is made up of two pigments, the PB15, a blue color, and the PBK11, which is a black pigment. Together they end up making this heavily granulating paint, and as you see here with my first wash, it already starts granulating right there on the paper before your very eyes. I did, however, decide to put in a little bit more of the paint to really show you guys all of the varieties you can have this paint in and what it will look like. This is a dual tone, so only two pigments in there, and my camera's white balance was working very hard to keep up with all the shades that it was seeing. The paint, as said, heavily granulates, and I love this more muted blue color as opposed to a French ultramarine. This somehow creates such a lovely atmosphere. It just really takes very little of this paint to set a mood, and it can be a dusk type of mood that you want to put down. It can be more of a shadow color in a lot of cases, or more of a stormy day at sea type of feel. I really like this paint and I have used it a lot already, and it granulates nicely, so it creates that texture, it gives me atmosphere, but it does give me a pop of color. I find this paint very nice to work with and very versatile, but I guess it does need to suit your style and your vibe. Last, but certainly not least, is the Lunar Black by Daniel Smith. Now this is a paint consisting only of one pigment, and you guessed it, that is a black pigment. It is the PBK11. So this is basically the Lunar Blue without the addition of the blue. So only the black pigment that heavily granulates and creates such nice textures and shapes, especially when you add more water to it. It can really create like chunks on the paper. It is stunning, but also a bit scary because it will totally take over a painting when you add it somewhere, not in a wash, but if you add more water to it, it can really set the texture for your subject. So be careful when using this, and keep in mind that adding a little bit of water will give you a lot of texture. And with that Lunar Black, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm super curious to see if there's any paints in here that really strike your fancy, that you already use a lot, or that will be added to your wish list for this Christmas. If you guys like this video, consider leaving a like or a comment, or maybe even subscribing to my channel for more content like this. I love hearing from you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!